The cracked plastic lid of my lunch container snapped too loud in the break room, and every head turned when my manager laughed. "Careful, Birdbone, you might float away." And I stayed quiet while something in me folded in on itself. Why did a comment about my body feel like it owned the whole room? My name is Serafina. I'm 36, and I work in operations at a mid-sized company where I am the only woman on my floor. Most days I can handle it. I keep my hair neat, my emails sharper than a tack, my voice calm. I learned early that if you sound emotional, people start treating your words like weather, temporary, not worth preparing for. I'm tall, slim in a way that makes strangers think they're allowed to have opinions. The kind of slim where men in the office think it's a group sport to feed you, like I'm a stray cat that wandered into corporate America. My manager, Sterling, was the kind of man who smiled with his teeth and never with his eyes. He liked nicknames. He liked power. He liked the way everyone stiffened when he wandered near their desks, like their bodies knew what their mouths refused to say. The first time he said something about my weight, I laughed politely. A small laugh, a safe laugh. He called me Twig. He said it like it was affectionate, like he was blessing me with a brand. Then it became a routine. In meetings, if I reached for coffee, he'd say, "That'll be dinner, right?" If I declined donuts, he'd say, "Trying to keep that little waist, huh?" If I did eat, he'd say, "Look at you. Didn't think you had it in you?" The guys would chuckle. Not because it was funny, because laughing was easier than being the next target. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was above it. I told myself words were just words. But words don't stay words when they start living in your day. They start following you to the bathroom mirror. They sit beside you in traffic. They whisper while you're trying to fall asleep, as if your body is a mistake you keep forgetting to apologize for. I went to my doctor, not because I thought I was sick, but because I needed proof. Something official, something clinical, something with a signature that said I was not a problem to be solved. Everything came back fine, healthy, normal, no concerns. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt angry, because the point was never my health. The point was that Sterling enjoyed reminding me, in front of everyone, that my body was a topic he could pick up whenever he wanted. One afternoon, I overheard two newer guys in the copy room. "She just doesn't eat," one of them said, like he was observing a rare animal. The other one shrugged. "Sterling says she's built like a toothpick. It's kind of her thing. Her thing. Like I'd chosen it. Like it was my brand color." I walked past them with a stack of printed reports and didn't stop. I didn't correct them. I didn't defend myself. I just felt my jaw tighten so hard it ached. That night, I stood in my kitchen staring at a bowl of pasta, and something in me clicked into place. If Sterling wanted my body to be office conversation, fine, but I would choose the conversation. The next morning, Sterling drifted over to my desk the way he always did, slow and casual, as if he was doing me a favor by noticing I existed. He leaned on the edge of my cubicle wall like it was his property. "What are you working on, Twig?" he asked. I didn't look up right away. I kept typing, letting the silence stretch just enough to make him shift his weight. "Inventory reconciliation," I said, calm, flat, professional. He watched my screen for a second, like he understood what spreadsheets meant. Then his gaze slid to the corner of my desk where my lunch container sat beside my keyboard. "Ah," he said, and that familiar grin appeared. "So you're actually going to eat today?" A couple of guys nearby glanced over. I felt it, that little ripple of attention, like the office had developed a taste for this. I turned my chair slightly and looked at him. Really looked. His shirt was pressed. His tie was perfect. His watch gleamed like a thread. His eyes were bright, waiting for me to play my part. I smiled. Not a big smile. Just enough. "No," I said. "I'm on a diet." The grin faltered. Sterling blinked. "A diet?" "Mm-hmm," I said, like we were discussing the weather. "I've been feeling kind of heavy lately. I want to drop some weight." One of the guys snorted softly like he thought I was joking. Sterling didn't laugh. His face tightened in a way that made him look suddenly older. "That's not funny." I kept my voice gentle. "I'm not joking." He leaned closer, lowering his voice, but not enough. He wanted the audience. He always wanted the audience. "You don't need to lose weight," he said, sharp now. "You're already, skinny, small, acceptable for his jokes." I tilted my head. "I know what?" His mouth opened, then shut. And right there, in that tiny pause, I saw it. Fear. Not fear for me. Fear of what it would look like if he kept making comments and I did something dramatic with it. Fear of consequences. Fear of paper trails. Fear of the kind of attention he couldn't control. I lowered my eyes to my keyboard and shrugged, casual as a yawn. "I just want to feel better in my body. That's all." Sterling swallowed. I watched his throat bob. "Serafina," he said, using my name like a warning. "You're not going to do anything stupid, right?" I finally looked up again. My expression stayed soft. Confused even. Like he was the one being strange. "Stupid?" I repeated. "Like what?" He stared at me. For a second, the office noise around us faded into background hum. Keyboards, phones, printer spitting out sheets like gossip. Sterling's eyes darted, quick, as if he was suddenly aware of witnesses. Then he straightened up too fast, like he'd touched something hot. "Just eat," he muttered, and he walked away. Not swaggering, not joking, walking. The rest of the day, he didn't come near my desk. He didn't call me Twig. He didn't make comments when I refilled my water. He didn't even look in my direction during the afternoon huddle, which was unusual because he normally enjoyed scanning the group like he was counting who belonged. That should have been satisfying, but the air felt different. Now, tighter. Like I'd pushed a domino and everyone was waiting to see what fell next. At lunch, I sat in the break room with my container unopened. I wanted it visible. A prop, a quiet threat. I watched the guys avoid looking at it like it might accuse them too. Later, as I walked back from the restroom, I passed Sterling's office. His door was slightly open. I heard his voice, low and tense, speaking to someone on the phone. "I'm telling you, it's a liability," he said. "She said she's dieting. She's already thin. If something happens, it's on us." I stopped so fast my shoes squeaked. He kept talking. "We need to protect the company," he said. "I'm not saying I did anything. I'm saying we should get ahead of it." My stomach turned cold. Not because I felt guilty, but because I understood exactly what he was doing. He wasn't worried about me. He was building a story where he was the responsible real one, where he noticed, where he cared, where he tried, where any harm became my fault and his jokes became invisible. My fingers curled around my phone in my pocket, but I didn't pull it out. Not yet. I just stood there listening, memorizing his tone, the words he chose, the way he said liability like I was a leaking pipe. Then I walked away quietly, like I'd heard nothing. At my desk, I opened a blank document and started typing a timeline. Dates, quotes, witnesses, every nickname, every comment, every laugh that wasn't laughter. My hands were steady. My heart was not. Quick real-life pause. When I'm editing these late at night, I get tired, and your comments are what keep me going. Hit like, subscribe, and tell me your city, state, or country. All right, now let me take you back. Because Sterling's fear didn't start that morning. It started the day he realized I was no longer playing along, and I was about to make sure the only story on record was the true one. The cursor blinked at the end of my timeline like it was waiting for me to either protect myself or pretend none of it mattered. I kept typing anyway. Not dramatic sentences, not angry paragraphs, just clean, boring facts, date, time, location, what was said, who was in the room, what happened next. I added tiny details that seemed pointless until you realize pointless details are what make lies collapse. Which conference room? Which mug was in Sterling's hand? Which coworker laughed too late? Which one looked down at the floor like he wanted to disappear? I saved the file with a name nobody would notice if they glanced at my screen. I emailed it to myself from my personal account with a subject line that looked like a grocery list. Then I sat back and stared at my lunch container. It wasn't even about food anymore. It was about control. About him deciding my body was office entertainment, then panicking the second my body became office liability. Around mid-afternoon, I walked to the printer and felt that strange shift again. Men who normally filled the hallway with noise suddenly found something urgent on their phones. Conversations dipped when I passed and restarted once I was a few steps away. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want their discomfort. I wanted them to remember what they heard the next time Sterling tried to rewrite it. When I got back to my desk, my email notification chimed. A company-wide message from Sterling. Subject line, wellness reminder. My stomach tightened before I even opened it. He wrote about work-life balance, about taking breaks, about eating lunch away from your desk, about how the company cared about its employees. He used the word care twice, like repeating it made it true. He ended it with a cheerful line about how leadership wanted everyone to thrive. The whole thing felt like someone wrapping barbed wire in ribbon. I stared at the screen and realized with a sinking certainty that he wasn't avoiding me. He was moving around me. He was creating evidence. A few minutes later, he appeared beside my desk again. Too casual, too practiced. Hey, he said, loud enough for the nearby desks to hear. A couple of us are going out for lunch. You should come. His eyes didn't smile. His mouth did. I kept my face neutral. I have work to finish. It'll do you good, he insisted. Fresh air, food, normal stuff. Normal, like I was abnormal. Across the aisle, Wilder pretended to be deeply interested in his monitor. Camden clicked his mouse a few extra. Times like the sound could drown out tension. Nobody spoke. Sterling's voice softened, but his pressure stayed. Come on, just for a bit. We'll grab something light. Light. Another word people love to use when they're talking about women's bodies. I nodded once, small and agreeable. Okay. Sterling blinked, surprised he'd won so quickly. Great. We're leaving in a few. He walked off, and I could almost hear the relief in the air. The moment was over. Crisis avoided. Everyone could go back to pretending nothing was happening. But I didn't say yes because I wanted to go. I said yes because I wanted to watch him perform. I opened a new note on my computer, added the time, and typed what he'd said, word for word. Then I waited. When we gathered near the elevators, Sterling positioned himself slightly ahead of me like a shepherd guiding a fragile animal. 4 guys came along. They kept their hands in their pockets. They looked everywhere except my face. The restaurant was a bland corporate place with bright lights and a menu that tried to sound healthy. Sterling ordered first. He made a show of choosing something balanced. Then he looked at me. What are you getting? He asked too loud. I could feel the table listening, even strangers who had nothing to do with us. It was the same old stage, different props. I stared at the menu, then closed it gently. Just water, I said. Sterling's smile froze. One of the guys coughed. Another shifted in his seat, like the chair suddenly became uncomfortable. Sterling leaned in, lowering his voice. Serafina, don't do this. Don't do what? I asked calmly. Make a point, he hissed, then corrected himself fast. I mean, you need to eat. There it was, the mask slipping. The real sentence underneath his fake concern. I smiled politely, the kind of smile women learn to wear like armor. I'm fine. You're not fine, Sterling said, and now his voice cracked with something that sounded like panic. Order something. I tilted my head. Why? He stared at me like he couldn't believe I'd asked. Because I told you to. Because you're embarrassing me. Because your body is making me nervous. Because I can't control the story if you don't cooperate. He didn't say any of that. He just tightened his jaw and forced another grin. Because we're a team. We take care of each other. The guys nodded too quickly, like puppets whose strings were getting yanked. I kept my tone light. Then you should let me take care of myself. Sterling's eyes flicked to the others, calculating. He laughed a little too sharp. All right, suit yourself. But his foot tapped under the table like a metronome counting down consequences. When we got back to the office, I wasn't even at my desk for 5 minutes before an email popped up from Human Resources. Subject line, quick check-in. My pulse stayed steady, but my hands went cold. The message was friendly, smiley in that corporate way that tries to soften the knife. Hi, Serafina. Can you stop by my office when you have a moment today? Just want to check in and make sure you have what you need. Signed by Jordan, the HR generalist. I stared at the email until the letters blurred slightly. Then I forwarded it to my personal account like I'd done with the timeline. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stood up and walked to the restroom, locked myself in a stall, and took a slow breath. Not because I was scared of HR, because I knew exactly why HR wanted to see me. Sterling had made his move. I washed my hands seconds longer than necessary, watched my own face in the mirror, and forced my expression back into something composed. I practiced a few sentences in my head, not angry, not emotional, clean, simple, questions, not accusations. When I walked into Jordan's office, the first thing I noticed was the extra chair, and the second thing was Sterling, already sitting in it. He looked pleased with himself. He sat with his hands folded, posture perfect, like he was about to receive an award for caring so deeply about his employee. Jordan stood up and smiled, but it didn't reach their eyes. Thanks for coming. Have a seat. I sat down slowly and placed my phone on my lap, screen down. I wasn't recording. I didn't need to. My timeline would be enough. My calm would be enough. Jordan glanced at Sterling, then back at me. This is a sensitive conversation, they began, but we need to address a concern that was brought to us. Sterling's mouth twitched, almost a smirk. Jordan continued carefully, like reading from a script. There's been a report that you've been skipping meals and talking about losing weight in a way that could indicate a risk to your well-being. I looked at Jordan, then at Sterling. The air in the room felt thick, like someone had closed a door on oxygen. Jordan added, we just want to make sure you're safe. Safe. Sterling had turned my body into a safety issue to protect himself. I kept my voice even. Who made the report? Jordan hesitated. We can't disclose that. I nodded once. Okay, then I have a question. Are you meeting with me because you're concerned about my health or because someone is concerned about the company's liability? Sterling's head snapped slightly toward me. Jordan blinked, caught off guard. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply watched them, and in that silence, I felt the power tilt, just a little, away from Sterling's neat folded hands. Because now the story had two versions, and only one of them could survive daylight. Jordan's pen paused above the notepad, like my question had knocked them off a memorized pass. Sterling leaned back, still wearing that polished expression, but I saw his fingers flex once against his knee. A tiny leak. Jordan cleared their throat. Our priority is your well-being. Then I can make this easy, I said. I'm not sick. I'm not restricting. I'm not in danger. I made a sarcastic comment because I've been getting repeated remarks about my body at work. Sterling's smile twitched. That's not what happened. I didn't look at him yet. I kept my eyes on Jordan. Before we go further, can you confirm something for me? Is it appropriate for a manager to give an employee a nickname based on body size? Jordan blinked again, and I could tell they weren't used to someone asking questions like a lawyer in a cardigan. Sterling cut in fast. I never meant anything by it. It's just office banter. She knows that. I turned my head slowly and met his eyes. I kept my voice soft. Say the nickname out loud then. Here, in front of human resources. Sterling froze. Jordan's gaze shifted to him. Sterling? He swallowed. It's not important. I nodded like I agreed. Exactly. It isn't important. And yet it became a daily thing. Jordan set the pen down, suddenly more alert. Serafina, can you tell me what was said? Yes, I replied. But first I want to clarify something. This meeting started because someone framed me as a risk. That story only exists because of a conversation. Sterling started at my desk about food and my body. Sterling's cheeks tightened. That is not fair. I didn't argue. I just reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Not a thick stack. Not dramatic. One page, cleanly typed. Jordan's eyes dropped to it. Sterling's eyes widened, just slightly. I started documenting after it became clear the jokes weren't jokes. I said, this is a timeline of comments that were made to me at work about my body. Dates, locations, and witnesses where applicable. Jordan hesitated before taking it, like they were holding something that could burn. Then they read. I watched their face shift line by line. At first neutral, then tight, then careful in a different way, like they were suddenly aware they were standing in a room with risk that didn't belong to me. Sterling leaned forward. This is ridiculous. She's exaggerating. Jordan didn't look up yet. Sterling, please let her finish. That was the first small crack in his control, and it felt like air returning to a sealed room. I kept going, still calm. Yesterday, Sterling approached my desk and made a comment implying I don't eat. I responded sarcastically. Then today he invited me to lunch and pressured me to order food in front of coworkers. And shortly after that, I received this meeting request. Jordan glanced at me. He pressured you to order? Sterling's laugh was sharp and forced. I invited her like a normal manager would. I was trying to be supportive. I tilted my head. Supportive would have been asking privately if I was okay. Instead, you talked about my body in front of others, then tried to manage how I looked in public once you realized your jokes could reflect back on you. Sterling's eyes flashed. You're twisting this. I nodded once, polite, then we can verify it. Jordan's eyebrows lifted. How? I kept my tone steady. You can interview the people who were at my desk. You can interview the people at lunch. And you can check Sterling's company-wide email that went out about wellness right after he spoke to me. The timing alone is telling. Sterling sat up straighter. That email was routine. Jordan looked at him. Sterling, was it routine? He opened his mouth and closed it. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Jordan returned their attention to the paper. Serafina, this timeline goes back months. Yes, I said. And I'm not the only one who has been nicknamed. I'm just the only one you targeted consistently because I'm the only woman on this floor. Sterling's face went pale. That's an accusation. It's an observation, I corrected, gentle but firm. If you want to prove me wrong, pull the record of who you've called what. Ask the men here how often you comment on their bodies. Jordan's posture changed. Their shoulders squared. Their voice became crisp. Sterling, I need you to step out for a moment. Sterling blinked as if he'd misheard. Excuse me? Step out, Jordan repeated. I will call you back in when I'm ready. Sterling looked at me like he expected me to flinch, like he expected me to apologize for making things uncomfortable. I didn't. He stood slow and stiff and left the room. The door clicked shut, and the silence that followed felt heavy but cleaner. Jordan exhaled through their nose and rubbed their forehead. I'm sorry this meeting started the way it did. I kept my voice even. I didn't ask for the meeting. I just want it handled correctly. Jordan nodded, then looked at me with something close to respect. You did the right thing documenting. I'm going to open an investigation. I stared at the desk for a second, gathering my thoughts. I want two things. One, I don't want retaliation. Two, I don't want him speaking about my body again to to me or about me? Jordan nodded again. Understood. Then they hesitated. There's something else you should know. My stomach tightened. What? Jordan's voice lowered. This is not the first time Sterling has been reported for comments. Different situation, different employee, same pattern. I felt a strange mix of anger and relief. Anger that it had been allowed to continue. Relief that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't overreacting, that this wasn't all in my head. Jordan added, that's why the documentation matters. It removes ambiguity. A few minutes later, Jordan called Sterling back in. He walked in with a controlled expression, but his eyes were different now. Less playful, more cautious, like he'd realized the room didn't belong to him anymore. Jordan spoke with a measured calm that sounded like policy wrapped around steel. Sterling, an investigation will be initiated regarding repeated comments about an employee's body and workplace conduct. You are instructed not to discuss this with anyone outside of this process. You are instructed not to engage in any commentary about any employee's body, food, or weight. Any retaliation will result in immediate disciplinary action. Sterling's jaw clenched. This is extreme. Jordan didn't blink. This is standard. Sterling tried to look at me, but I didn't meet his eyes. I stared at a spot on the wall, neutral, like he was just another piece of office furniture that made noise. When the meeting ended, Jordan walked me to the door. If anything happens, email me immediately, they said. I nodded. I will. I returned to my desk and sat down. The office felt louder than usual, even though everyone was pretending to work. A few men glanced at me, then away. Not hostile, not friendly, just uncertain. Sterling stayed in his office for the rest of the afternoon. The next day, he didn't come to my desk. No nickname, no food jokes, no fake concern. By the end of the week, Jordan scheduled interviews. People were called in one by one. I watched men who usually laughed at everything walk down, the hall looking suddenly serious. One of them, Hayes, stopped by my cubicle after his interview and spoke without looking directly at me. I didn't realize it was that bad, he muttered. I kept my voice calm. You realized you just didn't want it to be your problem. He flinched, then nodded once and walked away. 2 weeks later, Sterling was removed from managing our floor. Officially, it was described as a restructuring. Quiet, smooth, no announcement, no scandal. He came by to pack his things on a Friday afternoon when most people were out. He didn't bring a box. He brought a single bag, like he was trying to convince himself he still had dignity. As he passed my desk, he paused. For a second, I thought he might say something. Something small. Something poisonous. Something designed to linger. Instead, he whispered, "You made me look like a monster." I finally looked up at him, steady and unreadable. "You didn't need my help." He stared at me like he wanted to argue, but there was nothing left to argue with. He walked away without another word. That evening, I opened my lunch container at my desk and ate slowly. Not because I had to prove anything, but because I could. Because my body belonged to me again. When I shut down my computer, a final email notification popped up from Jordan. It was short. Sterling's access had been revoked immediately after the investigation closed, and the company had decided to update training protocols for management on respectful workplace conduct. Attached to the email was a single forwarded message Sterling had sent to Jordan before the investigation began. It was his earlier phone call put into writing. He had typed in plain language that he was worried I was a liability. I read it twice, then saved it to my personal folder, and I realized the smallest twist of all was this. He never cared if I ate. He only cared when he thought his own words might finally choke him. I used to think silence meant weakness, but sometimes it is strategy. When someone keeps poking at you, they want a reaction they can control. So I stopped giving him emotion, and I started giving him consequences, quietly. The truth is, people like that do not fear being wrong. They fear being recorded, remembered, and repeated.